Polish officials today contradicting President Trump, who essentially gave Russia an out for violating Polish airspace.
Could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistake. But regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation.
Today, the Polish prime minister wrote on X, quote, "We would also wish that the drone attack on Poland was a mistake, but it wasn't. And we know it." Poland says Russia launched as many as 21 drones, forcing NATO countries to scramble fighter jets and shoot them down. Others crashed in eastern Poland.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Once again, Donald Trump comes to the aid of Russia. Every time that Vladimir Putin crosses another line, Donald Trump gives him an out. What makes this so infuriating is that his party knows better. The few serious people left in his government know better. The acting U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Dorothy Shea, said that, quote, "We will defend every inch of NATO territory." But those words ring hollow when we have a commander-in-chief who consistently sides with Putin over our allies. I wonder if, in fact, these expressions of solidarity from U.S. government officials might have the opposite effect, given how contradictory the president's statements are. The American government is not speaking with one voice. It cannot be taken at its word because it doesn't even know what it is saying. Not that it's any consolation, but we saw this coming. Here is Vice President Harris during the last presidential campaign predicting almost exactly what we're seeing from Donald Trump today.
Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
America's unwillingness to defend Poland against violations of its airspace is bad enough. But the elephant in the room is infinitely more terrifying. Poland may well be able to fend off these kinds of incursions and even a potential ground invasion, given how degraded Russia's military now is, thanks to Ukraine. But Russia still maintains a nuclear arsenal, the use of which only the U.S. can deter. On Friday, I spoke with Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman about Russia's incursion into Poland and the signal it sends about Vladimir Putin's intentions. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, in addition to delivering testimony before Congress in 2019 that led to Donald Trump's second impeachment, is an expert on Russian and European security. In part 2 of our conversation, we talk about that elephant in the room, America's shattered credibility when it comes to nuclear deterrence. Here's me and Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman. The one thing Poland does not have, the one thing the Baltics do not have, the one thing Ukraine gave up that might have led to the conflict we're now in is that nuclear deterrent. And if America is such a fickle, unreliable ally now, can the UK or can France, can someone else step in and provide that guarantee because it's the one hammer Russia really has left?
So I think that extended deterrence needs to be reliable. I guess country that embraces extended deterrence needs to believe that the U.S. would be there and employ nuclear weapons on its behalf. I don't think that there is necessarily a actor in Europe that would give them that kind of comfort. So, for instance, I think France has been talking about extended deterrence, but under, of course, singular French control and a determination. And you could see a scenario in which the French may make those kinds of noises, but when push comes to shove, will they be willing to employ nuclear weapons in defense of Poland when the response would be Russian nuclear weapons employed against France? And I think that there may be even a more dangerous scenario in that you could see nuclear proliferation. You could see Poland, which this is a little known fact, but one of the reasons the U.S. expanded NATO towards Poland, and one of the first countries that they offered NATO membership to was because Poland was demanding it and signaling that it was prepared to develop its own nuclear arsenal. Whether those were real threats or not in the 90s, those were threats that were coming out of different political circles in Poland. And now you could see that as the situation develops, you have a very high latent nuclear capability for Poland. They have the ability to do a crash program for nuclear weapons and achieve something very, very quickly. And that becomes quite dangerous because the Russians might not want that. They might attack that infrastructure. And you could see a lot of different things kind of unfold. And a lot of this is just the consequence of the U.S. just breaking the not just the norms, but the kind of the reliability and the partnership with our NATO allies. You mentioned an interesting, that's probably the more important point, but I just quickly Googled because I wanted to double check. Poland's GDP is about $1 trillion. It's over 900 billion, about half of Russia's. If you look at the coalition, the willing, that is that combined GDP would dwarf Russia's capabilities. And if they're thinking about, they're approaching 3% of GDP currently. There's a pledge for 5% of GDP. If you start taking a look at those numbers, yes, of course, the capabilities coming out of this NATO coalition, the willing, would dwarf Russia's. And setting aside the question of the fact that Russia's bogged down in Ukraine and really has no capacity to do these kinds of things, it's also a pretty big mistake on Russia's part. So they're trying to very, very carefully calculate out what could test and break NATO, what could drive wedges without triggering a military response. And one of the most important things that Poland can do is actually put a toe into the military sphere with regards to an expanded air policing mission and a no-fly zone that would then get Russia to be much, much more, careful to not push.
Hey everyone, it's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break to say just how grateful I am for all of your support for this channel and for this show. We have a big reporting trip coming up to Ukraine. I could use your help. We have to cover the film crew, interpreters, fixers, security. It's a whole thing, but it is worth it to be able to share with you and others what is actually happening on the ground there. I just published a feature story in The Atlantic about my last trip where I embedded with the drone unit at the front. Click the link below for the full article, and we'll be putting out more great fact-based reporting over Substack. Please consider subscribing. Everything I make from Substack and Patreon goes back into this show. Thanks for the help. Well, the one area that Russia still maintains a huge advantage in is hybrid warfare and disinformation, and literally billions of dollars spent on propaganda intended to divide us and to make Putin out to be the savior of values. Last thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap it.
Well, certainly Russia has looked at asymmetric capabilities to make up for the fact that it couldn't compete with NATO as a whole. Hybrid warfare has been part of that, looking at intelligence and security services, at sabotage operations, the information operations, just thinking about what happened yesterday with another bout of escalating political violence that really has implications for all of us, regardless of where you land on a political spectrum. But the Russian bots and the Chinese bots and the Iranian and North Korean bots were out there trying to inflame and divide us and, really sharpen what looks like a growing possibility of a domestic confrontation here. So I think that this is a dangerous situation that we have really not put enough thinking and effort into, not just with regards to Russia, but all our adversaries that are looking to stoke our divides. Frankly, the president of the United States is not a stabilizing, consoling, uniting figure. He's a dividing figure that, is I would say a partisan to some of our adversaries' efforts. He's by far, like, what the Russians and all these other actors put into dividing us dwarfs in comparison to what Putin or what Trump does on a daily basis. He is the one that does more to divide us, weaken us, and inflame the risks of political violence than anybody else. And that's why I think, national security and defense starts at home. As much as these things are important and our support to Ukraine is critical, we need to do much, much more at home to recognize the dangers that we're in.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Alex. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.